So hello and welcome to a Seismic Cinema podcast. So I'm Colin, and unfortunately Paul can't make it this evening. So we're Seismic Cinema, two friends who love to talk about movies and TV, and we've got two very special guests with us today. So we've got Terry and we've got Bruce, and we're really looking forward to hearing about their careers. So without putting you in the spot, are you happy to just give a wee introduction to yourselves?
Sure, go ahead, Terry.
Sure, I'm happy to. My brother was living in London. This was in '69, I believe, and I went over to visit him, and ended up going to London Film School. So that was kind of my introduction to the movie business, or filming. And then I came back to Los Angeles and pounded on doors for not that long, about 6 months, and got a job, and the rest is kind of history. I love the business. I was in it for 40 years. It's as anything is. It has its good points and its bad points, but it was great.
That's a good endorsement. What about yourself, Bruce?
Very good. I just had to turn the air conditioner off. It popped on. It's very hot here in Los Angeles. So,
I've got the heating on here.
Yeah. So I'm Bruce Logan. I'm kind of a motion picture hyphenate. I've done a lot of different things in the business, but I'm most associated with visual effects. And I began my career as an animator. I'm kind of a self-taught animator. But I think I started at the age of 12, and I took some early film work that I'd done for an animation company when I was 17, and got a job in an animation company. And then 2 years later, I was hired onto 2001: A Space Odyssey with Stanley Kubrick, who was my favorite director. So it was like all the stars were aligning, and that was the beginning of my career. And I was the director of photography on Tron, and I did some work on Star Wars, and I've done a lot of different science fiction movies.
It's amazing that you can just drop a name like Stanley Kubrick in there, and that's just a normal thing for you.
It is. So, I sat in a screening room for an hour every day with Stanley for 2.5 years, and had him read the riot act to me about my footage. You have to sit in there and defend your footage. And,
oh well.
It wasn't the way he wanted it to be, and so it was, and I thought nothing of it at the time because I didn't know any better. I was a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely come back to that, and yeah. I'm not going to lie. I've been quite nervous about doing this, and as somebody who stands up in front of classes of 30 pupils, it's quite strange having people on that have actually been involved in movies. And what we normally do is like review TV shows and movies and do like rankings of our favorite films, etc. But something that we'd really like to make our channel focus on is talking to people that have actually been involved in TV shows and movies. So this is the start of what we hope can be something special. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about your experiences today. So I briefly got some information about it from Terry in an email, but anyone listening won't know the connection between the both of you. So where did your relationship start?
How did it start, Terry? It's been
so
long.
I first met Bruce in Colorado. His sister was working on Badlands, and I was working on Badlands, and Bruce showed up one day, I think in your pickup, and you hung out for a few days and went back to, I think you were going back to LA. And then, we sort of ran into each other for a bit, and then I started taking jobs that you'd offered me, and there you go. Here we are.
That's very nice. I remember that well. I was actually coming in to visit my sister Michelle who was the script girl on Badlands. So, and yes, met Terry Bowen. Very good.
Very nice.
Remember that.
Well, I've done a bit of digging on. I've been looking up your IMDb histories and having a good look at them. So something I'm quite interested to see is you've mentioned a couple of things already, but what was your primary role? Because you've talked about as Terry's nephew Finlay described him as a photographer, like that aspect. But he's talking about special effects, visual effects as well. So did you have different roles throughout your careers, or was it usually the same thing, or was it a bit of a mix?
I did. I have like a three, well, actually more than that now, but I kind of had a visual effects career, and I had a career as a cinematographer, a director of photography, and also as a writer director. So and so as the, I've been very lucky to be able to do all those different things in the business. And I'm also an editor, which this is my edit station. I just finished cutting a Western here,
Very nice.
which will be out in about 6 months.
Okay, we'll need to check that out then. Terry, what about yourself?
I mean, it's been varied in the sense that I've worked on television, I've worked on features, I've worked on commercials. Each have their own little quirks. My choice in not going and staying in features was I was raising a daughter, or my wife and I were raising a daughter, and I didn't want to be away for 6 months at a time. So, but then after she went away to school and all that, then I started doing, taking longer shows. And as I said earlier, there's really a lot of neat stuff about the business. But one of the things that I loved about it was you really don't ever go to the same place to work. You're not going to a bank for 30 years or something like that. You're going around the world. So
yeah,
the first job I got was when I was knocking on doors was a commercial company in Hollywood, and so there was a guy that actually went to the film school, which is why I got in the front door, and who was Tak Fujimoto, and so then I got that job, and I did not know at the time, but Haskell Wexler was a partner in this business, so I was like, "What? I'm going to work with Haskell Wexler off the street." So that was nice.
it's like a different world. So, before we started live, you were talking about some of the projects you've been involved in. So, what have been some of your favorite movies? Have you ever worked on any TV at all, or is it all just movies?
Me or Bruce?
Either.
I've worked on television. Actually, Bruce and I both worked, it turned out to be my favorite show, which is a bit humorous, but we did a show in, I think, around 2010, 2011. It was a kids program, a children's program that was, Bruce will actually know more of the technical aspects, but it was shot on Long Island, and there was puppeteers in it, and it was matched with animated sets which were created and then married in a computer, and the puppeteers were great to work with. They were really funny, and just the whole situation was neat. I just really loved going to work every day.
What was it called?
Big World.
I think I saw that on.
Yeah, so it was puppetry in virtual set. So everything was shot against blue screen, and the camera had the computer knew exactly where the camera was through through a mechanical mechanism, and this was the thing that Terry pushed around in between the puppets and the live action actors, and there was a live composite of where the set was created virtually, and there was a live composite of the puppets and the people and the background environment. So it was very cutting edge back then at the time, because they hadn't virtual. Virtual production's a big thing now, and they do it for all the new Star Wars things. But this was kind of a smaller version, not much smaller. It was a pretty big stage, but one of the first, certainly that I'd been involved with virtual production.
It must have been quite interesting to see how the technology developed throughout your careers, and even as it's developing now. Like, was it just a case of constantly learning new things and having to adapt?
Well, yeah, it was. On 2001, the Space Odyssey. There was a movie about a computer. Hal was the main character in the movie, and it was, interestingly enough, there were no computers used in the making of that movie, except perhaps the adding machine in the production office. So everything was cams and gears, and everything was analog. And then later we worked on Tron, which was the first movie with any full CG animation in it.
Oh, really?
For that whole look, there was a whole curve that went between those two movies, and then finally, visual effects went completely digital, which I was probably not doing effects at that time. I was probably more into live action photography. But it's very interesting that they did that. So I've really seen the range of it, and really enjoyed seeing all that technology change.
And it continues to evolve today. Like the new debates. What do they call it? What do they call it when it's basically one set, but they add the backgrounds in digitally?
Well, it's virtual production, and that's what I was referring to with Big World, was that we were doing a baby version of what the Star Wars virtual photography is now.
What is it they call it? The sound? No, there's a name for it, because you hear filmmakers talking about it quite a lot. Is it called the? I'm just having a mind blank. They used it for like the new shows like Obi-Wan.
Right.
What was it called?
Well, it's all shot in a volume.
The volume stage, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, it's funny because it kind of goes back to process photography, which I used to specialize in, which was back projection, where you see the whole image together and you're shooting. And Terry and I worked a lot of that on Incredible Shrinking Woman, which was a movie that was done, and all the effects were done with front projection and rear projection.
Awesome. I've got a big confession to make, and I promise I'm going to sort this out. I haven't actually seen Tron or 2001: The Space Odyssey, but I am going to make sure that I get that sorted.
Well, shame on you.
I hope you have the attention span for the 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I'm promising you live here. Well, not live, but you know what I mean. And I'm going to do that. I was born in 1991, so that's a big part of our podcast, is catching up on movies that I probably should have seen that I haven't seen. And we did a podcast on The Shining earlier in the year, which is funny because you were talking about Stanley. I was going to call him Stanley, but I don't know him, so I can't call him by his first name. So, yeah. Another film that stood out on IMDb was Batman Forever.
Yes.
So,
I didn't do a lot of work on that movie, but I got a nice credit on it.
Yeah.
I shot some materials for visual effects. So I did some helicopter stuff, and I went out and shot glints on the ocean and brought that footage back, and then smoke elements and rain elements, and it was pretty meat and potatoes for me. But it's a lovely credit to have.
Yeah, definitely. It's just interesting clicking on the movies and reading some of the cast lists and seeing some of the huge names that are involved in these movies as well back then.
Right.
So that leads us into a nice bit. How much, this is the kind of things I find fascinating, like in your role doing like the special effects, doing the filming, like how much interaction would you normally have with like the actors in the movies? Did you get to know people quite well, or was it kind of standoffish, or what was the experience like that?
What do you say, Terry? When we're shooting effects, we don't usually, you might have one of the actors come down to work with you, right? But you never see the whole cast as an ensemble.
Yeah, I mean, effects. At least when I was involved in it, the technology kind of demanded that the actor was restricted by what we were trying to capture. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like getting into a role or something. So, but I mean, there's been other things where I never hung out with actors, but some are friendly. Like Sandra Bullock was amazing on Speed. I mean, she used to come and I don't know, just horse around all day long, in between scenes, and just a marvelous person. So
I love how casually you just name drop Sandra Bullock there.
Well, and I have to say that Terry is a humble man, but I have to tell you, he's probably, he is world class in terms of being an action camera operator, in terms of being able to go into an action scene and catch all the, you put a scene together and you bring all these big elements together, very high stress, and he's able to get in there and not miss the action. He's the guy that you turn around and you say, "Did you get it, Terry?" And he goes, "Yeah, I got it." So he's but it doesn't just stop at acting either. I mean, at action either.
Yeah.
Terry has operated in commercials for me for years and years and years. And, it's like, and their commercials are all about you grab a little piece over here and the camera's still moving. And so you get performances, but the camera's always in motion.
Yeah.
And so you're on the character, you're off the character, and Terry never misses the character. You always gets the line. He's always there exactly the right time.
Yeah, I've got no experience with it myself, but when I like watching like documentaries about how movies are made, and it's like a wee bit like you've got your own language. Like you'll say things and have like terminology that you both of you will understand, but to people who aren't in the know, they won't quite know what you're getting at. Maybe.
Yes, I would say that's true. You get that. That's why the producer always says, "Well, my son-in-law, he wants to come in and do this." I said, "Well, when you can send him to the grip truck, get me an apple box and a carabiner, and if he can walk out of the grip truck with a carabiner and an apple box, then he can start working. But otherwise, the guy's on set and he's no use to you because he doesn't have that language."
Yeah, it's a bit like teaching has its own language as well. There's so many abbreviations and like slang terms for things that, like, if you were speaking to somebody who wasn't in education, they don't quite know what you're talking about half the time.
Right. I'm sure it's that in every business,
Yeah. So it's been great hearing about your different experiences. Is there a particular project, if you were to pick like your ultimate favorite movie or show you worked on, is there one that really stands out, Terry? Is there one? Start with yourself.
Well, I mean, obviously because it is what it is. As Star Wars stands out. Even though the unit that we were on was we were doing explosions, which was what you would see in the film. and the climax of that was obviously the Death Star. But there was this little snippets throughout my career that were, like I did G.I. Jane with Ridley Scott, and it was. I remember one time he used to. We'd arrive, and he'd arrive about 45 minutes later, and so we set up for a shot. And I remember this one instance where we were set up. He gets on the radio and says, and I'd lined up a shot. He got on the radio and said, "Pan right," so I did. And then he said, "Pan left," so I did. And he said, "No, you were right." Which, like for Ridley to do that, it's like, whoa.
Some of the names you're coming out with today are a different level. What about you, Bruce? Is there any particular, is Star Wars one of your highlights as well, or was there any other big standouts in your career so far?
Star Wars, Tron, because of the process and because of how groundbreaking it was.
Yeah.
And I was on Tron for a lot longer, but basically Tron is three different kind of photography. There's live action color photography. There's the computer graphics, pure CG, first time it was ever done. And in fact, the Academy wouldn't consider us for an Academy Award that year because they said we cheated because we used a computer to do the effects. And then there was this photography that we did that was to be turned into and looked like graphic animated footage. So the characters were in they were kind of in jumpsuits with kind of circuitry on their costumes, and we shot them in a black limbo with lots and lots of light, and each frame of film that we shot, they blew up onto a large animation cell, and with backlight and front light, they diffusion filters, they rephotographed it on an animation stand, and the movie was created that way. And it was being involved in that process and coming up with some of that stuff was a big highlight for me.
Awesome. I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but was there any experiences you look back on that weren't quite as memorable or you didn't quite enjoy? Is there any are you not allowed to talk about those ones on Terry? You got any suggestions?
Well, I don't want to name names because it's just I feel it's a little rude to do so. But
right, we're old enough; we can name names, Terry.
No pressure for me.
A director, a very famous director.
We've had careers,
who this was a film done in San Francisco. Who I had this enormous respect for a car chase scene that he had done in this famous movie. And so we were doing a much lesser car chase, but I was shocked at how little he knew where to put the camera. I was absolutely shocked. I went, this guy did, he did this thing. What doesn't he know? And I mean, it was like, he would say, put it over here. And I'm going, well, if you do, this is going to block that. And, it's just moving things around your head. And that's just like, but anyway, so because that day and the following day went really well, I was his hero. I was the golden child. I could do no wrong until we got into another day in which I was the worst operator in the world and got fired.
So
you're not.
I think it's the same guy. I had a really bad
Yeah,
experience. But on the movie, Did we name his name?
No.
But I guess he had done the French Connection, right?
Yes.
So Owen Roisman obviously
Uh-huh.
told you where to put the camera on that show, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But who got credited for it was
Your IMDb, you can work out who it is.
I'm really curious about this, and Terry's mentioned this in an email. What determines whether you get a credit or whether you don't? Is it
Well, your contract,
what's that?
your contract,
Okay.
so or your deal memo when you sign on to a movie. Pretty much these days, you get a credit. Everybody gets a credit. But back in the day, I guess when I was very surprised to get a credit on 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was my first screen credit
Yeah.
that I got because there were literally thousands of people that worked on that movie, and there were 6 visual effects credits, and I got one of them. So I was like amazed, but it was just given to me. It certainly wasn't in any contract that I'd signed to get one.
And do you get paid? Do you get paid extra for a job if you get a credit, or is that just in your contract as well?
No, the credits are for people in the industry because
Yeah.
nobody. I guess you go to the movies and you expect to see a credit up there.
Yeah.
There's no one in the theater to look at it. And they look around.
And how does that make you feel? That everyone gets one now. Does it make you feel a bit bitter, or is it just the way it is?
That if you don't get one.
No, you were saying that like everybody gets a credit now, essentially.
Right.
Does that make you feel a bit frustrated based on some of your experiences?
Not really, because I think if someone works on a movie, if they bring the food to the set and they keep I think craft service I think they should get a credit.
Yeah.
It's just that the credit rolls are so, especially with all these Marvel movies and all the big visual effects movies, the visual effects credits go on. You get all the people from India that worked on the movie, and then all the people from Korea that worked on the movie.
Well, the culture with the post credit scenes that has benefited the credits because people are staying. I stay to the very end of the Marvel films to catch all the trailers. So
Yeah.
no. I when I was a child, I lived in Pasadena. I'd go to movies there, and the movie was actually a lot of times it was the credits were at the head, and that was it. But the movie would end, and they'd roll the credits, and everybody's getting up to leave, and I'm kind of dodging around trying to see, but is now in LA. It's amazing how many people stay. They just stay and watch the credits.
yeah.
And on features, the credit roll is a lot slower than on television. On television, there's no way you can read the credits. So, they go by so quick. But they do the credits, but it's it's kind of like it's a throwaway. I mean, it's an insult really for the guys because we all pitched in, did a lot of hard work, and this even goes to like the standby painter who would come in and match paint unbelievably well. You didn't have to go over it and all that. It was like go do that door because it got scratched up or something. He'd go in, done, and all these people are amazing craftsmen as far as I'm concerned.
It's amazing how many people are involved in a film. Like, if you do, as I do quite often, sit through the credits, just the sheer number of names that come up is really amazing.
Yeah, well, I don't. What?
The new credit on films is 30,000 people were employed making this movie.
Thanks very much. No, it's interesting because they're now you're seeing a lot of credits that were the COVID team is on the credit, which they should be because it's a very important position. But you can tell like a movie was made in 2017. I was watching one the other night, and there was no COVID team, and I was waiting for the COVID team, and I went, no, this is 2017. There wasn't going to be one.
The good old days.
Yeah.
No, it's something that myself and my co-host are really like, and I wanted to get your talk about the kind of matte paintings, slightly different, but have you watched The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett?
I've watched Mandalorian. Yeah.
You know are you a fan of the closing credits, the way they show all the concept art?
Um,
You know the bit I mean?
I don't actually remember that, but I love the Marvel stuff at the beginning of the movie when
Aye.
they flick through all the comics and then they,
Yeah.
I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoy graphics at the head and tail of the movie.
Yeah.
Especially
I
when
like quite often buy the big. You'll like this because you're obviously been involved in these movies. It's like the kind of visual dictionaries. It's big books full of the original images and all the kind of background bits of information about the movies. I quite enjoy buying those kind of books as well.
right.
I've got a few of them packed away. So with I'm just a total kind of fanboy here, but you've mentioned some huge names already, like Sandra Bullock and Stanley Kubrick, etc. And without touching on any Star Wars, because I'd like to talk, if you're willing, quite in depth about Star Wars. But who are some of the big? If you were to be asked, like, who are the most well-known people you've met in the industry, whether it's the directors or the actors, or is there any names that stand out? Like, what ones would you use if someone asked you that?
As a director, actor, I did 3 projects with Clint Eastwood that I really enjoyed.
Really?
Yeah. I did a picture called Firefox with him, and then another one called Bird, which was the Charlie Parker story
Right.
about a musician, and another project called the Rookie, which is less known, but I, I once again I had this kind of little niche for doing like process effects photography, and I had done some of that for him I did all the cockpit stuff with Clint in the cockpit in Firefox for all the dogfight sequences, etc.
Well,
And so when he was doing the Charlie Parker story, he knew that I knew front projection and rear projection, and they they were trying to figure out how much it was going to cost to dress. They have little towns in all these movie studios,
Yeah.
So it can be redressed to kind of a different era, and you can put period cars in there, and he had all this footage that he was going to shoot driving around in the car, and they thought, well, that's going to be way too expensive. So they found this footage that was shot in the 50s, and they restored the footage, and I used that as a background plate to put into all the driving sequences.
There you go. It's mind blowing, all the creativity that you guys have. Terry, what about yourself? You're quite good at casually dropping in some of these names that I'm like freaking out over. Have you got any other ones up your sleeve?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of comes out as it comes out. I mean, there's obviously certain stories that that stuck with me, but I kind of judge directors and actors on how they treated the crew, and generally they treated the crew really well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in both actors and directors. There's people that don't treat the crew well, but generally they do, and it's really appreciated because on some shows you're working 14 hours a day, you're exhausted, and you're I mean, not the director, but you're aware the actors have been in their motorhome or had a late call or something like that, and you're kind of like, if they start with attitude, it's kind of like so. I mean, like for instance, in saying this, I remember when I did a film called Holes, and John Voight was in this, and he we had our last shoot was on a night, and at 4 a.m, John Voight came out to say thank you and goodbye to everyone, and he wasn't even working that day. I mean,
Yeah.
which is like, that's some class.
Yeah. It's good to hear you've had positive experiences. I always like hearing me behind the scenes stories about what people are like in real life, because the difference is I'll hear these names and be like, oh my god, it's so and so from that film, but you'll know them as people, and that's probably why you'll both probably view it quite differently. You'll just think that that's my friend or that's my ex-colleague.
I wouldn't really say that. I'm still in awe of actors, and I don't usually at the end of the movie I don't get their phone number and say, hey, can I send you an email or something? Yeah. So I don't have a lot of friends that are actors. Peter Fonda was a very close friend of mine. I loved working for him, and I loved being his friend in all the following years after I'd worked for him. So,
Yeah.
So he was in my Rolodex, but yeah, I can't say I socialize with many people.
Right. Well, we've one name I actually saw on Bruce on your IMDb was quite an interesting one. Was Jamie Foxx.
Yes.
So you did a project with him.
Yes, it was. I at that time I was shooting a lot of kind of HBO they did all these different comedy series, and they started each comedy show with like a film segment, and they were always like looking. I did a thing with George Colin that was meant to look like the 30s, and so it was a period piece. It was all black and white, and so those projects were really fun to do. And
Yeah.
I did one with Jamie, and yeah, it was good. And he was. I didn't know who Jamie Foxx was then, and most people didn't either. But he went on to have a huge career.
Nice guy.
Yes, very nice guy.
Very nice. Right. I see when it comes to the Star Wars portion of this, I just want to hear everything, like how you got into it, what it was like, your experiences. I'm just all ears here. I just fascinated to hear how you got involved and the experience. Star Wars is A New Hope's my all-time favorite movie. So
I'll start with that because Terry and I worked very closely on the little segment that we did. But I'll tell you how our little unit happened, because it was very strange. I had George had been shooting the live action in England, and he had come back, and the visual effects. They were developing the very first motion control system to shoot the spaceships. And, in 2001, we shot these spaceships, but they were moving so slowly that it didn't, you couldn't really see that it was animation. But the ships in Star Wars were moving so quickly through the frame that they had to become motion blur. They had to be streaked, And John Dykstra, who was the effects director, was developing this system for doing that. But when George came back from shooting the live action, they hadn't shot a frame of film yet. So he was very frustrated. So he wanted me to shoot puppeteers in black velvet suits and put the spaceships on long rods and like fly them, puppet them through the air to see if he could. So he was looking for a different solution, and so I got involved with that, and of course that didn't work, But then, so our little unit that we had became a pyrotechnics unit, and that's when and Terry came on board. And you remember the first thing that we shot, Terry, at the Berendo stage? You remember that little tiny stage that we started shooting on?
Now, Brendo was that on Santa Monica Boulevard?
It was north of Wilshire, and it was west of it was east of Vermont somewhere. I mean, it was like
Oh, I think I know.
so. Anyway, that's when we showed up, and we had this effects guy, Joe Viscoso, who's no longer with us, and Joe was our mad chemist that was mixing all these different bombs, and he would put he would put we would put bombs inside bombs and then gasoline around the bomb. And then we'd put a whole bunch of titanium in there, and we'd put all this stuff together. But we all met up on this little tiny stage in East Hollywood. And we were going to try doing what we call a zero-G explosion, which means that you explode, the camera looks directly up, and the bomb goes off directly overhead, over the camera. And so what that does is it, normally when you see an explosion or a miniature explosion, there's a little mushroom cloud, and you can tell the forces of gravity working on it. But when you look up at an explosion, it comes out in all directions, so it looks like it's happening out of space. So we started experimenting with that, and it had to be very high quality photography. So we were shooting it with Distrivision cameras, and I think they went up to about 100 frames a second, something like that. But anyway, so there was a whole career here for Terry, who was like, when the bombs went off, I kind of ran over to the other side of the stage, and I left Terry sitting underneath this piece of plywood with a sheet of glass on it, and he's looking directly up at this explosion that's going on. So I put this man in danger.
It's quite
What I
interesting.
didn't see was me covering myself with a fireproof blanket and reaching out to turn the camera off. No, just kidding. Well, I mean, as a matter of fact, I mean, which, comes to the kind of how the crew all works together. I believe Jerry was the key grip, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So Jerry Dietz, God bless his soul. I trusted him enormously, so if he built something that was going to protect me, it was fine. Let's do it. I mean, I wasn't like, oh, is that going to be thick enough? Well, what happens if?
And I had the same faith in him, so it wasn't like I was throwing you under the bus.
No. I kind of know where buses come from, but anyway, yeah, my memories of underneath there were, I mean, particularly with the VistaVision, we got that camera, I believe, from UCLA, because it was so kind of removed from the filmmaking that UCLA had it sitting in some warehouse or someplace. They and somebody found out that it was there or something. It was a VistaVision high-speed camera, and so we got it, and it actually, I believe, would go to 120 frames. But if you think about it, that's an 8-perf Polacross, not a 4-perf. So it's like 240 frames.
Well,
the mechanics of it.
I think maybe we tried to push it to 120 frames, but I think in the book it was only supposed to go to 100.
So that part.
I think we probably welded a few movements.
And that part, and then it broke.
Yes.
So in the VistaVision camera, you have to do 3 loops instead of the 1. You have to do a magazine feed loop, which feeds the film into the movement of the film plane movement, and then you have to do another one to get the film back out because of a couple reasons. The magazines start perpendicular to the film plane, and then the film moves around and goes, when it goes horizontal through the gate. But so when that thing blew up, and I think, and actually I think everybody concurred with me at the end of the deal, was because we were moving the camera, what would happen is, and the film was moving so fast, if it would land on the inside of the magazine, on the take-up side, and it would not take it up. So what then you got film feeding in, and the speeds it was going, it would just like, it was, when I opened the camera after that jam, it was like, it was full of film. I mean, it was like you had to take it out bit by bit.
I think later high-speed cameras they had little plates in them that rotated on bearings.
Yes.
With the magazines that we were using, they were just covered in felt, so the film was actually it was running on felt, and that's not a very slick surface to.
No, interesting enough, those magazines with the inner rotating thing, turntable, did show up after the fact. I think probably because no one knew. They just grabbed magazines for the camera, and they would fit the normal VistaVision 8 for the high speed. But what we did interim was Bill Short had made some Teflon pads that he put inside the magazines, and that stopped the film from binding up. So.
It's amazing how all these little details, like, people won't know that this happens, or won't. It's just, we just see the end product on the screen, so it's interesting to hear everything that happens behind the scenes. Just for context, I'm really curious to know what parts of the movie you worked on, your unit. So what were you blowing up? Like, what was it? Particular spaceships or planets, or?
We blew up the Death Star, which is my claim to fame in life. Like, oh, Bruce Logan, that's the big, you blew up the Death Star.
Do you like my light? You can't really see it, but it's a Death Star light.
It's very good. My wife has a Mirable Death Star.
So was that the main purpose of your unit? Was the Death Star scenes?
It was the major explosion. So what we did was we blew up the Death Star, and then we also blew up Alderaan, but we don't really like to talk about that so much with all those innocent people.
I'm sorry, blew up what?
Alderaan.
Was that a planet?
Yes.
Oh, come on, Terry.
Sorry.
That's Princess Leia's homeworld.
Yeah, I just look for the credits. What the hell?
Well, Alderaan was in the Obi-Wan show that came out recently.
Excellent. No, I'm sorry, but I'm not. I mean, I love Star Wars, but I'm not well versed in the whole trilogy thing, or quadruply, or whatever it is now.
No, I have to say I go to a lot of Comic-Cons, and people bring out this trivia, even about the second and third movie, and I'm like, who's Boba Fett? I don't know. Who is that guy?
So quite a lot of the things you're talking about, I am slightly familiar with from the Light and Magic documentary series, because it talks a lot about the technology that was developed, how John Dykstra was like way behind schedule, and George wasn't. I can't call him George. You called him George. I can't just call him George. That sounds weird. That I managed to just stay calm when you just referred to George Lucas by his first name. That was interesting. So, yeah. So was there quite a lot of tension and stress at that time trying to meet the deadlines? Because obviously Star Wars is famous for not having the smoothest production schedule for the original movie.
You see in that documentary, there's a lot of activity going on in the parking lot with girls in bathing suits sliding down.
Yeah.
hanging out in the hot tub, and so the stress couldn't have been that high, you know. So.
But they were. It's Star Wars: A New Hope is famous for being a movie that shouldn't have happened and almost didn't happen. So, did you feel that stress when you were making the films in terms of meeting deadlines, or were you just enjoying yourself?
I was coming in kind of doing, you know, honestly, I felt no stress at all. You know? I was coming in kind of after the fact, so I didn't have John's headache, which was like, is the motion control going to work or isn't it going to work?
Yeah.
But there's so much invested in it, and it was so high tech. It was just really on the cutting edge.
So do you know George Lucas quite well then?
Well, that was John I was talking about, but
Yeah.
I haven't really seen. I've only seen George once since the rap party on New Hope.
So what's he?
I was at the Directors Guild.
What's he like in
Well, he was
reality?
when I saw him at the Directors Guild, which was like 30 years after the movie was made, you know, at least 20 years. He was still mad that he was disrespected by everybody. So, I mean, this movie, it like changed his life and gave him an empire, you know, and he was talking about the movie and he said, nobody would let me shoot all the crews in England. The only people that worked hard for me was the art department. You know? So he was a bit of a whiner for me. Sorry, George.
Yeah, I don't think George Lucas will be watching this, but if he is, he's more than welcome to come on and tell his side of the story. Yeah, so how, I don't know if I'm...
I just have to say, during production, he was very sweet to me, very supportive.
Yeah.
And a brilliant filmmaker, because he was the first person that came up with, that I'd ever seen. He made a rip-o-matic for the battle sequences in the movie, which means that he got footage from all these war movies that I'd grown up with as a kid, like Dam Busters and Tora Tora Tora, and he cut this little animatic of how he wanted the battle scene to go. So you knew that you needed a shot that was 17 frames long of this ship going this way and through the camera, you know, and it was just brilliant. You know, everything he really came up with. You know?
Yeah, I know Star Wars has got a lot of. Well, I knew the kind of Death Star. Well, the space fights in Star Wars in general are based off the old war movies as well, and I don't know if I want to ask this question. If it's a touchy subject, just tell me to go away. But just why did you not come back for Empire? Was that?
I wasn't invited.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the other thing that happened was Industrial Light and Magic (ILM) was this company that was in Van Nuys that was led by John Dykstra, and all my friends were members of Apathy. Bill Short, who Terry mentioned earlier, was one of the engineers there, brilliant engineer and visual effects guy. And what happened at the end of the film is that George kind of broke up the company, and half the people went up to San Francisco with him to start the new ILM, and the rest of the people that stayed started a new company called Apogee.
Okay.
And so the reason that I didn't, you know, I hadn't gone up there with that crew that got up there, and what I did was not really applicable to any of the other movies anyway.
Yeah, I actually remember that now that you say it. There was, because John Dykstra himself left, didn't he? Yeah, he was one of the ones that left after A New Hope as well.
Well, yeah, I don't see it as I see George leaving because he was the one that went up to San Francisco.
Yeah.
ILM to me was a place in Van Nuys that all my friends worked on.
It's amazing how many movies they're involved in, because when you get further into the Light and Magic series, I didn't realize half the films that ILM to this day are still involved in doing the special effects for.
Well, I have to say, at the time, I thought everybody was crazy. I said, why are you leaving Hollywood and selling your house, and you're going to go up there with George Lucas, and he might never make another film. And of course, he became an empire. So I was very wrong on that one. But, but I couldn't understand it at the time, why all these people were going up there and making such a huge commitment to do so.
But you both, Terry and Bruce, you both said earlier, you look back on that period of your life with great fondness, and it was a great experience.
Well, the thing I liked the most about it was, at least I was totally innocent to the whole thing. In other words, this was just another job. I mean, I was actually really highly impressed by all the motion control rigs and all that, because I'd never seen anything like that. And they try and explain it to me. I go, yeah, okay. But it's just my general reaction was, well, it's another movie, it'll be great. And I didn't go to the screening of it, which I don't know if it would have made any difference or not. But the stock at Fox was like $9, and a week later it was $27 because of Star Wars. I mean, that's how impressive that movie was. And it was, I mean, it was just another movie. I didn't, like Bruce said, there was pressure going on in other parts of the scene, like with Dykstra and Lucas and all that. It all seemed relaxed and fine. Nobody was hassling us. I didn't hear any, money talk and all that. I mean, we were a separate unit, but, it was, I mean, as I said at the time, I thought it was another movie, and then obviously it wasn't. You got a scene stealer there.
I've got an intruder.
Yeah.
He likes to come in at least once when I'm doing these.
Very good.
Excellent.
You must be so proud, though, although you describe it as a small part, to me the fact you were involved in general is like mind-blowing to me. So it must be quite a big thing to look back on. I know you said it was just a job, but you can obviously see the impact that's had on so many different people's lives, including my own.
Well, the funny thing about it to me is when I'm feeling blue or whatever, or regretting something I did, I always go back to, well, you blew up the Death Star. Yeah, no, it was, I mean, obviously it was. And I mean, the response from people was terrific and all that. But, I mean, it's by far the most famous picture I ever worked on. When we're I was segue into one of the most important pictures I felt I ever worked on was G.I. Jane, because Ridley really respected what I did.
Yeah.
And a lot of directors, they don't respect really what their operators do. And, and Ridley coming out of his whole visual thing and all that was, I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah. Now, that seems to be a big theme, that it's a big part of I suppose in any job, the big part of your experience is how you're treated and how people respect what you're doing. Talking about respecting people's work, have you ever watched the special editions of the Star Wars movies, and did they make any changes to what your department did, and was there anything noticeable there?
Our explosions were they created some kind of cosmic ring around our explosions, and they modified. It's very hard to get a copy of the original. I was hoping that because it was now owned by Disney, that they would release an original version of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans want that to happen. So how do you feel about those changes? Is it just part of the industry, or?
So
Is that a bit disappointing to see your project changed?
it's their movie; they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. That just reminds me, I've got a couple of questions from my co-host that I promised I would ask when I was on. So Terry, you can take the first one if you want to. Do you ever watch a movie and a TV show nowadays and think I would have done that differently or I could have done that better? Is that how you view films, or do you just enjoy watching things?
No, I think always, depending on the film. I mean, there's certain films that you're just, spellbound by, and you just watch the film because it's taking you on a ride. But the other films that were like, not my cup of tea or boring or not good, I would just start looking at technical stuff because I couldn't deal with the storyline. So I would just look at, dolly moves and lighting and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so, but recently, probably because of streaming, and maybe my age or maybe my curmudgeonness, but I I look at a lot of movies and a lot of TV now, and I go, well, in 15 minutes, this person's going to be dead, or this person's going to marry that person, and I mean, they do the subtle hints. It's like, I'm kind of going, I really shouldn't be able to do that. So,
Bit predictable then.
yeah, well, not everything, but a lot of them are. So
Yeah. Bruce, what about yourself? Do you find yourself doing that when you're watching things, or are you able just to relax and watch?
If a movie comes up to a certain level of technical, I won't say excellence, but if it comes up to a certain level of technical, I'm a good audience. I'll go with the movie. I won't pick it apart.
Yeah.
Right? But if something is really terribly made, it'll take me out of the movie.
Yeah.
Then I'm gone.
Yeah, me and my pal have noticed since we started doing the podcast, when you watch things, you do view it differently when you know you're going to then go on and talk about it. So it is interesting how that changes.
Yeah.
The other question that he wanted to know was, is there any film that you wish you had been part of the production of? Is there any movie you just wish you'd had the opportunity to be involved with?
for me, not really. I mean, I
No?
can't think of anyone. I mean, I don't look at. Yeah, I don't look at. I mean, I don't see a film and go, boy, I wish I was working on that.
Aye.
Terry was offered a job shooting Lost, the TV
Oh,
show.
I love Lost.
And they're so for Terry, I wish Terry had done Lost. But,
Did you turn down Lost?
I probably was doing something else at the time. I didn't. There was a lot of that happened.
A big world to happen.
He's quite lucky that he didn't, because the podcast would have went on for an extra half hour, because Lost is one of my favorite TV shows. I actually saw, Bruce, you committed a cardinal sin. You involved with Star Trek as well as Star Wars.
I did. It's kind of like in the commercial business, you can't beat Chevy and Ford. They don't let you do Chevy or Ford. So I was always.
Yeah.
So was I. I mean, we did some tests. I don't know if we ever did anything that was actually in the movie, but we certainly did a lot of testing at Paramount, as I recall, right?
So was that before Star Wars or after Star Wars?
It was after, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must have been after. I
you-
remember this story about Bob Abel, who was supposed to deliver shots, and what was it? 13 months later, they finally, they got the runaround production, so they finally went over there and went, okay, show us something, and he had nothing.
No, but he bought a lot of equipment.
Yeah, and bought a lot of equipment.
A lot of computers in that by that time. Yeah, no, I worked on. I shot the first 3 minutes of Star Trek the movie. You were on that, right, Steve? We shot with
I
Robert.
don't. Where were we?
Robert Wise was the director on it.
No,
We shot the Cleon sequence. No, didn't you do that?
no, I was busy on Big Big World.
So you were shooting with Ridley, you know?
Yeah, our shooting was really.
So that was fun. That was fun shooting with Robert Wise, you know, because he's a legend in sound and music. And,
Well,
Or I could have been getting yelled at by Jan de Bont as well.
that's true. That's true. I wouldn't have been yelling at you.
No, exactly.
well, you sound like you've had a really good working relationship anyway.
Yeah. No,
The last question, it was from one of our Twitter followers that made me laugh. I don't think you can maybe answer this because of the department you worked in. It was a. Let me get the exact wording of the question. Hold on, so I don't get it wrong. It was, I think it was like, how many of the actors make that noise when they do the lightsaber fights? How many actors make the swoosh noises when doing the lightsaber scenes?
I do not know the answer to that question. But I've seen a lot of actors on the Western that I did.
Did you have any? I know you said some movies than others you would have more interactions with the actors, but did you have many interactions with the iconic original trilogy members?
Not on Star Wars.
No.
No. A
On
lot
I
Star
suppose
Wars,
they would all have been in the UK, wouldn't they?
Say again?
They would have all been in the UK filming the live action stuff.
Well, but they were American actors. But yes, all the live action was shot.
Yeah.
Well,
Was that Leavesden Studios?
no, I believe that was shot at ABP Studio, ABP in Boreham Wood.
Yeah, because I've been to Leavesden Studios where they filmed the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
I've been on the studio tour, and I think they filmed some of Star Wars there, if I'm correct, at some point.
I do not believe that they have any of New Hope there.
Right, maybe it's later films, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, I thought I was onto something there. So we're just about drawn to the end, and I just wanted to ask if, and I think Bruce, you've already been talking about some stuff. Any like current or future projects, or how kind of active are you still in the industry?
Well, I just kind of by default shot a Western.
Yeah, you were saying at the start.
And
Yeah.
enjoyed what I'd shot so much that I offered to cut it, and I'm just now delivering that project.
Where will that be? Is that for television, cinema, or?
I doubt whether it'll run in the cinema, but it'll stream for sure. And
Right.
it's called Two Sinners and a Mule.
And do you know what like services that's going on to, or does that come later on?
I don't. We just have a distributor, which is the Hollywood Media Bridge.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they're gonna put it out yet.
I'll watch out for it then, and I'll check it out when it comes on then.
Okay.
What about yourself, Terry? Are you still involved in anything at all, or
no.
no? Happily retired.
Well, yeah, I fully retired. Basically, the reason I would say is I principally, I mean, although I shot second units and I've shot a couple of features, I basically made my living being a camera operator. And camera operating now has turned into an athletic endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And so at 77, I'm just physically not capable of running around with a camera for 8 hours or 10 hours. So
that's fair enough, yeah.
Yeah,
So
which is fun.
I had shot a movie called Lost Fair, which I co-wrote and directed in 2016, I think, which got released in 2018. And Terry, is that the last time you worked on that movie?
Was that? I think that was after the San Diego stuff, right? You know, the Vista. whatever that thing was. It
Yeah.
was after. Yeah, most likely. I mean, I might have done an odd day here and there, but if probably not.
I talked Terry into shooting second unit for me, and then we had like an 11-day schedule to get the movie done, and he was going to shoot. He was going to shoot the taxi that we had in it. It was kind of a character in the movie, and Terry would come to work, and I said, "Yeah, I've got these great shots for you to do." "Oh no, you don't have the cab. We're using it." So I frustrated him so much that he left the business.
So fortunately, there was a lot of fun people to talk to when I was waiting to get the taxi to shoot. So it was good.
Okay.
I wanted to add one thing else, which I'm sure it's probably boring now that I think about it, but a number of people, when they find out that I was involved with Star Wars, asked me how big the Death Star was, and when I do this, they go, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "It was just a little bag of powder," and they go, "What?"
You've ruined it.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is they don't real. I just say, look at the cut. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, if you look at the cut, it's a standalone shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I always tell people that frame one of my explosions was bigger than the Death Star itself. So you never see it.
I'm seeing behind the curtain here. I've got. I apologize for the mess. I'm currently tidying my flat, but have you got any advice on how I could blow this thing up?
Very carefully these days. Oh, look at
Like
Wow.
That's a good. That's
our dog just finished chewing up a soft version of that. Yeah? Imperial Walker.
I'm embarrassingly, I got that for my 23rd birthday.
That's lovely. I love that.
No, that's good.
I'll always be a fan. I got the original trilogy on VHS when I was like 5 years old, and me and my co-host we've just been hooked ever since that age. So it was the main thing, one of the main things that got us into doing the podcasting in the first place.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm just going to add that I get the sense that you feel a bit intimidated by the business. I mean, in explanation from me, when I first started working, the first set I walked on, I was totally lost. I mean, things were buzzing by me and all that, and I'm standing in the middle of a hurricane going, what the hell's going on? But you get used to it, and then it just becomes another job. I'm sure it's the same in your, in your profession.
We've had like guests on the podcast, but it's usually been like friends or people we knew, and maybe people that are like directors locally. We've had like an author on, but I was quite nervous about having people on who were involved in like real movies and that had all this experience. So it's just obviously it won't. It's hard to describe, but we really do appreciate you coming on and talking.
Been very relaxed, and I think you've done a good job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, I want to leave you with another thought, which is my daughter's in the film industry as well, and she said she's a horse racing fan. So she says that she can deal with any actor in Hollywood, no problem. Doesn't bother her a bit. She gets around horse trainers, and it's all jelly need. It's just how it is,
The first time we did a podcast, we were so nervous, and I'm a school teacher, so I'm up speaking in front of 20 kids every day. But it's just getting used to it. Like we don't bother as much now when we do it, but just I think it's because Paul's not here today. I've usually got him to bounce off as well. So, but I'm glad you've enjoyed coming on, and it's a good chance we're contractually obliged to do a shameless plug at the end of the the episodes. So this could be useful for you guys as well. So this is going to come out on Monday, the 24th of October, and we've got a YouTube channel. Seismic Cinema is what we've called it. It's actually named after the. I know you were joking earlier about not knowing who Boba Fett was, but you know Slave One, the ship,
Yeah.
Boba Fett ship. It has these bombs essentially called seismic charges, and they make that really cool boom noise. I don't know if you know the noise I mean.
No.
Well, the weapon's called a seismic charge. That's where the name for our podcast came from. So we're on YouTube. We're on. Sorry?
You have the sound? You can play for us?
I don't know. I think I might get sued for that.
Is this kind of like a concussion grenade that the SWAT teams like to use?
Right. I'm going to take a risk and just play it. I do not own this sound. I'm just doing it for. Right. It's a really cool sound. Let's see if I can find it. Hopefully you can hear it.
We got company. Hang on.
You hear it? Right. Don't know if you managed to hear that.
I did.
Yeah, so that's the seismic charge that makes that big noise at the end. I'm probably going to get a copyright strike now after that, but it's worth it.
Tell them it was a parody.
It was a real parody. I actually made the noise myself there.
Right.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. I tagged yourself in one. I don't know how often you use Twitter, Bruce, but I found you on Twitter. There was an account for you anyway. Facebook, Instagram. You can also listen to the audio versions of our podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all the different places. So it's Seismic Cinema, and I hope people enjoy listening to hearing all about your guys' amazing careers.
Well, thank you, Colin. I think you did a great job.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Colin.
Thank you. I've got one last thing for you. If you could give any advice to someone going into your line of work, is there any advice or just wee nuggets of wisdom you would impart on somebody?
I'll give a pep talk about it.
There you go.
It's one of the few. I mean, right now it's it's a healthy business. I mean, it's entertainment, and people are still watching entertainment. Whereas, like in America, they're not building washing machines. So I recommend it to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I tell them the downfalls and all that, but I tell them, if you stick with it and you do a good job, I mean, it's a good business to be in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, if you're fortunate enough, or if you get into the union eventually, I mean, the union, as it stands right now, I mean, their medical insurance is unbelievable. I mean, it's probably the best in the country. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits for it. And the other thing I was going to say is, you don't need a college education. They're not interested. They're interested in how you perform. So
solid advice.
That's my pep talk.
There you go.
And on that subject, I remember your daughter saying that when she was working at Imagine Entertainment, that she would get applicants from USC and the USC Film School, and she would never accept the people with a college education.
Really?
Well, maybe a college, but not that college.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, I would just say that, people always complain about, I don't seem to be able to manage to break in. And I have to say that throughout my career, I felt like I'm still breaking in. So you gotta really stay with it. I used to think, I shot a movie called Big Bad Mama, and it came out, and everybody loved it. And I thought, oh, well, I'm all set. You know? And then you have to just keep reinventing yourself. You know, I was waiting for the phone to ring, and nothing really happened. You know, so you've got to really stay with it, and do it passionately. You know? And I think the other thing is that people, you know, you got to break in. So you've got to come in as a production assistant or come in craft service, or you're gonna. But as soon as you can, whatever you decide you want to be in the business, you want to be a director of photography or you want to be a director, just start doing that job as early as you can. And if you have to make little movies on your own, that's a whole lot better than sitting around waiting for something to happen. So take the initiative.
Well, thank you very much. Hopefully, I'm sure some people will benefit from that. And something we like to do just at the end of our podcast, I wouldn't expect you to know it, but we like to share our slogan we have for the podcast, which is always sounds so cheesy when you say it, but the power of escapism, because we really believe in, like for me personally, if you've got stresses at work or stresses in your personal life, sitting down with a good movie or some sci-fi, it really does help escape reality for half an hour or an hour. And it's a big part of my life, and obviously film's been a big part of your life as well. So that's the kind of message we like to get across. So thanks again from me and from Paul, my co-host who's not here. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm just going to end the podcast here, but I'll still be in the room once I hit the button. So thanks for listening.
Okay. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.